Well, hello, Water Topics Overview Committee members that cannot join us in person. We wanted to make this video so we could give you a virtual tour. My name is Joel Paulson, the Executive Director for the Diversion Authority, and I'm going to show you some highlights today along with some content experts to be able to show the great work that's been done on the project to date. So my life has really been impacted by flooding. I've had numerous family members that have lost their homes, and I've seen the devastation that happened in '97 and 2009. And we've all come to the realization that we need to have this project and we need to keep it moving forward. I'm happy to show during this tour today all of the great work that's been done to date. And right now I'm walking along part of the levee here in Fargo and this beautiful flood wall that was implemented. Before this project was put into place, we used to have 20-foot earth and clay levee here protecting all of downtown Fargo over here to my left. And after 2009, it was just evident that we cannot continue to rely on these temporary measures. I was personally involved in a number of levee monitoring during 2009. Part of the stretch that I was looking after actually had a breach. Fortunately, we were able to fix it and shore it up. But it was a massive amount of work, and that story can be told numerous times across the city of Fargo during 2009. As you all know, we were successful in our ability to fight that flood. But as scientists, we also know that the ability to have a much higher flood than what we experienced in 2009 is a very real possibility. And so we continue to move forward with this project in effort to provide substantial flood protection for the city of Fargo, the city of West Fargo, Moorhead, Horace, Harwood, and rural Cass County residents. So I was a member of the diversion board in 2016 through 2018, and upon assuming the responsibilities of the executive director, I've really come to rely on a lot of the expert engineers and scientists that have been working on this project. And today our first guest that we're going to talk to is Nathan Borboom. And here he comes right now. Hi Nathan, how are you?
Joe. Not too bad, how about yourself?
Good, good. So Nathan is an engineer at the city of Fargo. I'll have him talk a little bit about himself, but he's been involved in this project since the beginning. So.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Borboom with the City of Fargo, Division Engineer. I've been heavily involved in all the in-town flood projects that have been going on for the past, over 10 years now. Since 2009, we've built over 22 miles of levees and flood walls. We're standing here in front of the 2nd Street North flood wall. This was built in 2016 and 17. This one was built by the Diversion Authority. It is all the way from NP Avenue up to about 5th Avenue, the 5th Avenue underpass. This flood wall has actually seen water in 2019, so we did get to test out components of it in 2019. This flood wall is a critical component of all the in-town works that have been completed since 2009. 2009, 97, all the historical floods except for 2019, we actually had to build a temporary levee out on 2nd Street here. That was quite an effort every spring to have to do. We couldn't start building that levee until the river actually got to about a stage of 24 feet, and we had water on the street at 30 feet. So it was very critical to time that construction just appropriately, and it took probably about 2,500 trucks to bring that clay where this flood wall now sits. So it was a large effort, and all the, when you think of all the emergency levees that we had to construct, this was our most difficult to construct and held back most of the water. Luckily, it was successful, and now we have this permanent flood wall we can rely on in the future.
Well, this looks great, Nathan. So there's obviously been a lot of work done already. Can you explain to the legislators how much work is left to be done?
Sure. So like I said, we've built over 22 miles of levees right now. We still have about, I think it's 4 or 5 miles still to construct here in town. with the change of Plan B going from 35 feet to 37 feet, that required additional in-town levees to be constructed beyond what was originally planned under the original diversion project. So right now, those are the projects we're concentrating on. There's 5 neighborhoods that we're specifically working on right now. We hope to construct 3 of those next summer, and then the following 2 in 2022 that would be. So we're getting close to wrapping up the in-town works, and hopefully we will be able to do so soon.
So it's interesting. So these projects here are actually part of the diversion project. Is that right? I mean, they all kind of work in concert with each other. And so we need to complete this work as well as the channel and the southern embankment and all of those other associated structures. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The diversion project will not operate at a flood of below 37 feet. So at 37 feet, you're still going to have quite a bit of water up against this flood wall here that we're staying next to right now, as well as a lot of other levees through town. And then even as the diversion continues to operate, we're going to continue to have to rely on all these levees and flood walls to safely pass those floodwaters through town. So without these levees, it would not be a complete project.
And I just mentioned previously that statistically we know that there's a chance of a much greater flood event than what we experienced in 2009, which is the flood of record. What is this infrastructure built to? I mean, can we handle a 500-year flood or greater?
So without the diversion, no. We would still have to build emergency levees even on an event less than the 100-year flood without the diversion. So we'd still be looking at, if we had a flood similar to 2009, Fargo would still have to be building about 20 miles worth of emergency levees. So even though we've completed over 22 miles, we still would have a large emergency effort on our hands if we experience that 2009 flood again. However, once the diversion is completed, on the 100-year event with the additional in-town works I just mentioned, we will not have to complete any emergency measures. And on the 500-year event, though, we still would have to. But at that level, we feel it's a much more manageable event that the city is willing to take on, once the diversion is completed.
Sure. So we're standing in front of a pump station. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. So this is a pump station that serves basically all of downtown Fargo here. It has 5 pumps in it that are 15,000 gallons per minute each. So it's a rather large pump station. It will handle a lot of water and move it. And these pump stations are necessary for any time the river is high. We can no longer gravity flow any storm, rainfall or snow melt into the river. We have to physically pump all that water into the river. So that's a critical component of the flood infrastructure, is not just the levees and flood walls, but also all the pump stations we have throughout town. And right now, the city of Fargo has 75 of these throughout the city.
So 75 pump stations, are a lot of those related to Red River flooding, and are those going to be part of the diversion project as well?
Yes, all these 75 pump stations are critical as well, just like the levees and flood walls, to safely pass those floodwaters through town. And some of them majority of them are located on the Red River, but we also have legal drains coming through the city. So Drain 27 or Drain 53 are a couple of them on the south side of the city. Those have lift stations or pump stations along those as well to pump all that runoff into the drains.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so I understand that we have a lot of flood risk from those drains as well, right? So if there were no diversion, we're talking about many miles of potential levees to try to give us some level of flood protection along those drains.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. So not only do we have to worry about the Red River, so only one side, luckily, Fargo has to worry about. More has to deal with it on their own. But we also have to worry about 2 sides of these legal drains. And you're exactly right. There's miles of those legal drains coming through unprotected through the city that we have to either build temporary levees or try to build a permanent levee along there, which we have done in some areas but not completed.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. We're always focused on the Red River flooding, but we have the Cheyenne River, the Maple River, all of the tributaries that come in from the west also cause problems in rural Cass County. The city of West Fargo, to a certain extent, they do have their Cheyenne diversion, which the FM diversion is going to dovetail into. But it's a pretty major concern and definitely a benefit for the diversion project to be able to provide that comprehensive protection for everybody in the Red River Valley in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. This project is a metro-wide approach to solve, the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Harwood, Horses, everybody's flooding issues from all those rivers you mentioned. There you go. So here is the actual electrical room. So this is where all the electrical components are that handles all the pumps and motors on the other side. You can also see here's the level in the wet well today. So right now it's about 7 feet of water sitting in there. Again, it's 30 feet down. So if it was raining out today, you'd see that water level coming up. And when it reached a certain level, it would call for one of the pumps to turn on. And it just cycles through all these 5 pumps on its own. So that way we make sure that we get equal amount of hours on all the pumps, and then if for some reason the water's coming in so fast that one pump won't keep up, then it'll call for additional pumps to turn on until all 5 pumps are running. So.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. And so all of these new lift stations with these PLCs are all tied into a control center somewhere, right? So you can monitor remotely what's happening with the pump stations?
Yep, correct. So part of that is the SCADA system. Yep, and that remotely, reports to a server that the city of Fargo has, and I can pull it up on my phone. And we can look to see if there's any issues with the lift stations. Is there any alarms that may be going off, or which ones are running as well? So it's a helpful tool for our public works when we got 75 lift stations. That they can go and remotely monitor and see if there's any issues that they had to go check out.
Yeah, that certainly provides some advantages over what happened in 2009 when we had to probably manually check on these pump stations and have some redundant backup pumps and generators and everything else around.
So
yeah,
it's nice to have or take advantage of technology that exists today.
For sure, that's excellent. All right, Nathan, why don't we move on to another spot? I'd love to explore more about where the city of Fargo's at with their
Absolutely, we can go check out one of those drains.
So Nathan, this is the First Avenue North Bridge, and so this is a crossing. So I notice a large opening here of our levee system.
Yep.
How do we manage to deal with this?
Correct. So yeah, here there's removable aluminum planks here that we install. So about every 8 feet, there would be a column coming up along the First Avenue Bridge in this opening here that our public works guys will come in when the water's rising. They'll install those and they'll create, that wall that we need to hold back those floodwaters. So this one here is about 160 feet wide. So it's the longest one in town. It takes our public works guys, if they bring about 10, 12 guys down here, they can get installed probably about 5-6 hours. So it doesn't take too long, but still something that we have to make sure we get in place at the perfect time.
Yeah. And I remember this bridge was closed in, 2019?
Yes.
It had floodwater up against this temporary barrier here.
Yep, so correct. 2019 was the first time we got water up against this removable barrier here, and it worked as expected.
Yeah, I call it temporary. I guess it's removable because it is certifiable as far as 100-year protection.
Correct. Yep. It's something that's utilized elsewhere in the state. Grand Forks has, a handful of these as well, and Moorhead has them. And Fargo here, we have, I believe, 6 of these removable openings now throughout the city. So we try to limit them because obviously they're not, as structural as, a concrete wall is, but it's still something that we can rely on during a flood and allows us to maintain, the transportation aspects that come through the city.
Yeah, I suppose it wouldn't have been feasible to reconstruct this bridge and raise the elevation so you go up and over.
Correct.
So this is a cost-effective, innovative solution here. So when this is closed and during, say, a 100-year flood event, do we still have good transportation conduit between Moorhead and Fargo?
So the main avenue bridge is elevated high enough where there we do not have to do any temporary measures on. So that allows to keep that connectivity between Fargo and Moorhead. And then, of course, the interstate bridge is open as well.
Sure.
But that would be the only 2 bridges open during the 100-year flood versus the, 6 that we have today?
Sure. And how many of these removable barriers do we have along the
So we have,
location?
I believe, 6 here. So we got a couple up by the El Zago Golf Course. We got 2 here at 2nd Street North, and then we got 2 over at 2nd Street South as well. So
Excellent. All right, well, let's go down south and take a look at what we got going on down there.
sounds good.
I know this area was impacted in 97 and in 2009, and actually where we're standing right now, there was a home here not
Correct.
that long
Yep.
ago. Is that correct? So we're seeing a lot of levees, flood walls, as we talked about, along both sides of the drain here. Obviously, these are also going to provide protection while the diversion project's in place as well. Right?
Correct. Yep. So just like downtown, during the 37-foot flood, there will be water up against these levees and flood walls here, along here. So you're absolutely correct. Here we're standing where 3 homes used to exist. They were built, probably in the late 80s. So they went through the 97 and 2009 flood. We had the sandbag behind them. After 2009 flood, these 3 homes, as well as I think we're up to 255 homes right now that we've purchased and removed throughout the city, were removed and allowed us to build the levees. So when we go through the project development, we try to maintain the houses as much as possible. I mean, obviously we don't want to remove houses unnecessarily. They're our tax base as well. But unfortunately, there is, quite a few homes, like I mentioned, over 250 of them that we did have to acquire and remove in order to allow us to build levees or flood walls through here. There are some areas throughout town where we have been able to build levees and flood walls behind existing homes and not have to acquire them. The stability of the riverbanks or the drain channel allowed it. There we had to acquire private easements or permanent levee easements behind these homes on their private property. I think right now we're up to 90 or almost 100 of those that we purchased as well or had to acquire. So not only have we impacted 250 plus homes to remove, but we have also impacted over 100 people's lives as well by building a levee or flood wall in their backyards as well. So
yeah, I think that's a good point, Nathan. I mean, when you look at this area right here, you can see some of these levees are pushed back quite a ways, obviously where the homes were removed, and that does increase some flood retention area, also bank stability, of course. But then you can see where there's areas where we could save homes, and there's flood walls in order to keep those in place.
Yep.
And so it's kind of a balancing act. We're obviously impacting folks and trying to figure out ways that we can put the least impact, I think, on neighborhoods and people. So.
Yep. So we look at the least impact to the individual property owner, but then there's also a financial aspect as well.
Right.
So a levee, if you just build a levee, it's probably about $200 to $300 per linear foot, where a flood wall is closer to $2,600 to $2,700 per linear foot. Mm-hmm. So flood wall goes up in price quite a bit.
Sure.
But when you consider, the values of the homes as well as, the housing stock within the city, sometimes it makes sense to put the flood wall behind the homes, maintain that housing stock, especially in some of the, first, time home buyer type of level of homes, so that's one thing our city commissions, tries to maintain as much housing stock as possible, especially that affordable housing,
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act,
Yeah.
for sure.
I hear all the time, well, why don't they just stop building in the floodplain? And you had mentioned these homes were built in the late 80s, and part of the problem is in the late 80s we didn't know what the flood risk was.
Absolutely.
We hadn't had any of these large impactful events that we've had since 97, and the floodplain ordinances weren't developed. The National Flood Insurance Program was just in its infancy at that time. And so as we get to know more and more about flood protection and where we should be building, we're not building in the floodplain anymore along these drains. We're pushing them back. And the city has come up with a very robust floodplain ordinance. So all homes built now are out of the floodplain. Is that correct?
Yep. So I'd maybe step back a little bit. The city's been actively managing our floodplain since the mid-'70s. We became a participating member of the NFIP, or National Flood Insurance Program, since mid-'70s, about when it became in its existence. But of course, back then the maps were drawn based off of historical knowledge. You'd go up to a guy that went through, the previous floods and said, where'd the water go up to? And he'd put a line on the map, and that's kind of how the floodplain got drawn back then. It wasn't as scientific as it is today. Today we know a lot more information. We're able to, build more appropriately. So you're exactly right. Since the mid-'70s all the way up to today, our floodplain ordinance has been changing continuously as we continue to learn more and more about what the river is actually capable of doing here. And we have a few ordinances in place. One is, the river setback ordinance. No home can be constructed within 450 feet of the center line of the river anymore. So that's historically was not the way it was. If we had that ordinance back in place, in the 80s when a lot of these homes were built, we would not had to buy those homes out. So that's a big change for us. And we even have that setback ordinance, similar one on the drains as well. So from 175 feet away from the drains, no homes can be constructed there anymore as well. So we continue to learn. And then of course our elevation requirements change as well too. So we know that, we're mapped today on the 100-year floodplain at a river stage of 39.3. Well, our flood record is almost 41 feet. And through the additional modeling that's been done through the diversion project, we know that our flood risk is even probably higher than it is higher than the 2009 flood. That's about a 50-year flood that we experienced there. So we're requiring, by ourselves, it's not a state ordinance or FEMA ordinance or anything like that, but the city of Fargo by ourselves is requiring these homes to be elevated above our future 100-year floodplain too, if for some reason diversion didn't happen. So we're making sure properties are not being built like they were before, that they're being built appropriately, that levees are incorporated into any new developments as well, and that we're reducing those reliance on sandbags. We're trying to get out of that business, absolutely.
You make a good point. It's more restrictive than state and federal requirements for building construction in Fargo. Yeah, that's a good point.
This area here kind of illustrates all 4 available options that the city utilizes, or a lot of options we use. So like I've said, we try to maintain the house in stock as much as possible. So, on the northeast side of this area over here is an area where we have been able to build a flood wall and levee behind existing homes, purchase those permanent easements, and now have that line of protection that we're looking for. Then kind of another example is on the southwest corner of this area here is an area where, again, we were able to build the levees behind the homes, but we built not your standard just earthen levee as well. So another option to build the earthen levee is we do a short retaining wall that's outside of the core of the levee, but also reduces the footprint of that levee in those guys's, or in the private properties, those yards. So helps maintain, about 15 feet additional width of their yard. And then, of course, the last option that we use is the buyout option. Here in this cul-de-sac here is where we acquired 3 homes, removed those, built the levees on them. And then on the northwest corner here is an area where we acquired 18 homes up there, removed all those, and built a levee through there. So those are really the 3 options that we use, And then a key component, though, of building levees anywhere throughout the city is also the Park District. So the Fargo Park District is a separate entity from the city of Fargo. They're their own governing body, but they are a very willing partner for the city to be able to impact a lot of their properties. And we've, here on the Rose Creek Golf Course, we shut this golf course down for a whole summer to allow us to be able to build a levee across the golf course. Which in return, though, helped us, not have to acquire so many homes, but also got that line of protection that we needed there. And for example, in 2009, during the spring flood here, we were running out of time to be able to build a levee or sandbag levee behind all these homes. So there's a component here where we just physically put a couple excavators out in the golf course, start digging right on site, destroying their golf course, and throwing that dirt up on site and constructing a levee right there. So we didn't truck any dirt in, we destroyed their golf course for a whole summer there as well to be able to protect the city during the 2009 flood. And that's just one example. There's countless areas throughout the park district, whether it's Mickelson Field, where we eliminated 3 softball fields, and they allowed us to build a levee on those, so without the park district, we wouldn't have been as successful as we have been to date with building levees.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nathan. And I remember during the 2009 event, the night it actually crest, the forecast was for a 45-foot crest, which would have been much higher than what our temporary protection was built for.
Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, in 2009, the crest is just short of 41 feet, but the levees that we're building throughout town, the earthen levees are right around that 43.5 to 44 foot mark, which is, our sandbag levees that in 2009 were all built to 43 feet. So, basically the same height as our levees. And you go and extend those levees through some of these existing homes, and you just try to, picture again what 2009 looked like with, 6 to 7 foot tall sandbag levees behind these homes, and just the effort, to go place those 6 million plus sandbags that we had to place, and place all those volunteers right next to those rising floodwaters, those cold rising floodwaters. There's a lot of safety concerns with trying to continue to use sandbags as our line of protection.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nathan, I thank you for all the hard work that you've done for the city of Fargo and now for the Diversion Authority as well. I know it can be very difficult working with homeowners that need to relocate and move out of their homes and do the buyouts. And Fargo's done a number of those. But you have not had to use any quick take actions and only a minimal amount of court action on those properties. Is that correct?
That's correct. So of those 255 homes we've purchased, we've only gone to eminent domain twice. Yes. So we tried to be, more than accommodating to property owners, but also respect the taxpayer dollar as well. So we negotiate, very well. Our team does a pretty good job and been successful on acquiring a strong majority of the homes without having to take any court action.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of a balancing act again right there, and making sure that we're using taxpayer dollars the right way, and also being very respectful and empathetic for the situation that we're asking some folks to be in.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Here with Dwayne. We're at the inlet and control site for the diversion channel, and I'm going to be asking Dwayne some questions about the progress of the Corps' work and where we're at today. So, hi there, Dwayne. Nice to meet you.
Good to see you again, Joel.
Yes.
Dwayne Perkins, structural engineer with the Army Corps of Engineers in St. Paul.
Great. Let's go take a look. So tell me a little bit about the project site and where we're at with construction this year.
So project site, as you know, a couple miles south of Horace. This will be the linchpin for the system that basically allows water to get into the diversion channel from the pool. Where we're at with construction is we're actually placing the foundation segments for what will be the structure itself, the gated control structure, and starting to build some of the walls that will tie into the rest of the southern embankment for the rest of the project.
Yeah, I can start to see some things coming out of the ground now. I know there's been a big hole out here for a number of years, and it's kind of encouraging to see some of the structure elements being constructed now. So when did this project start?
This project was awarded in December of 2016. Got going that next summer, kind of excavating the hole, and then kind of with the illegal injunction shut down for a little while. But last summer kind of really got going, driving piling for the structure, as well as kind of this summer started placing the concrete. So you can actually, like you said, start seeing the concrete structure kind of come out of the ground.
Oh, excellent. So you talk about piles. Those are steel I-beams that are driven down into the ground. How deep do those go?
So the steel I-beams, like you said, the steel I-beams basically support the structure. The soil up here is great for farming, but not great for building structures on. So what we do is we drive them into the ground about 70 or 80 feet down, into the glacial till, kind of just a hard layer of soil down there, and that will support the structure from moving.
How many of those piles are located at this site?
Oh, there's miles and miles of pile.
And Ames Construction is our contractor out here?
Yep, you're correct. Ames Construction out of Burnsville, Minnesota is taking care of the construction for the diversion inlet structure.
And they're also the contractor for the wild rice control structure.
Yep,
right?
yep, absolutely right.
And that's being constructed a few miles away from here. And I understand that project's going along very well.
Yep,
too.
right now they're driving piling for the wild rice infrastructure. So it'll be pretty cool to have two structures a couple miles apart, actually pretty close together in terms of schedule. You
Sure.
can almost kind of look into the future for the wild rice and what they're building at the diversion inlet structure.
So are the crews working between the two sites, or does Ames have specific crews for each project?
I think Ames has specific crews for each project.
Okay.
Their pile driving crew has been kind of going back and forth, but I think the carpenters and stuff, I think are unique to each site.
Sure. And the wild rice control structure is unique because you're building that on a peninsula, basically, and you're going to be rerouting the Wild Rice River through that structure when it's complete.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Basically just a little peninsula of land. We're building it off the side, and then when it's all done, we're going to reroute the Wild Rice River right through the structure. Very similar to what's kind of down the road, the Red River structure, looking into the future. So
I was out there a couple weeks ago, and I couldn't believe how big the hole was. To get down to the river bottom, and it is pretty amazing. We'll show the legislators some photos and video so that they can see the magnitude of that. But very deep excavations that are occurring there.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we just had a big pour out here a few weeks ago, and we're planning another one this weekend, I understand.
Yep, so as you can kind of see down there, there's the crews down there finishing up the reinforcement layout for the control structure. That'll get placed Saturday morning, starting bright and early. That'll be about 1,100 cubic yards of concrete getting placed for that one. It's about 6 or 7 feet thick. That'll actually support the bridge, the steel gates, which control the amount of flow which go into the channel. So that one's obviously pretty critical to the entire structure. So
1,100 cubic yards?
Yep. So you guys were out here a couple weeks ago with Senator Hoven, and that one was about 500, 550 cubic yards.
Wow.
Next one's about 1,100 yards. So that one will be, and that is 2A. So the twin on the other side will basically be the same one. So there'll be 2 big placements coming up, and then one this Saturday and then one in the future.
Wow. So they'll basically pour concrete all day long on Saturday in order to do that 11. So what's a typical cement truck hold for yardage?
Around 10 cubic yards of concrete.
10. Wow.
So
we're talking
about 110 trucks they'll need throughout the day.
Sure. And all that material is being supplied by local vendors right here in Fargo?
You are correct. The concrete is being produced by Aggregate Industries, right up by 12th Avenue, up there.
Sure. Yeah, that's one thing that we talk about quite a bit is just the magnitude of materials and workforce and necessary to complete this project. And we're just seeing some of the initial impacts, positive impacts as far as that's concerned. We do hope to let the diversion channel and start construction on that next year. And that's going to dovetail into this project, in fact.
Yep,
right?
You're absolutely correct. Where the diversion inlet structure will end is where the channel will connect. So we're kind of almost start of the channel. So it's kind of cool to be able to see into the future a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And the Corps will kind of coordinate with the private developer that we hire for the channel as far as how these elements all kind of come together right here. So excellent. I see some vertical piers. Is that where the gates are going to be located?
So what you see here to the left, covered up in the white plastic, that's basically the dam wall. So
Okay.
basically just a concrete wall, and that will extend all the way out to kind of the dirt pile there where you see on the left. So you can imagine the soil will come up to there, and the concrete wall will then will come out and basically meet up with another concrete wall, and that's kind of where the gates and the rest of the structure will start.
Got it.
It's kind of from the right of that plastic
Okay.
to the right all the way across. So on top of the plastic there, you can kind of see it looks like a bridge pier almost. So our bridge deck will actually sit on top of that. So in the future, you can envision a semi truck, a pickup truck driving across the top of the bridge, basically to get all the way across the structure.
Wow. So when you look at the soil on either side of the inlet here, is that about how high the embankment's going to be coming in and leaving this location?
Yep, you're exactly right there. The soil on both sides would kind of where the concrete structure will end. So that pile on the left and then the pile on the right, they're kind of the north. That's where the concrete structure really will end. But you're right, that's the top of the soil there is about the same elevation the top of the embankment will be when it's all said and done in a couple of years.
Sure. So, a lot of people tend to think that this dam we're building is going to be a Hoover Dam type of situation, but it's really, you can see obviously the embankment, but it is not that obtrusive.
No, there's only one Hoover Dam, and this is not it. This will be an amazing engineering project when it's all said and done, but Hoover Dam's another animal. So, but no, it won't stick, grossly above the landscape.
Sure. So when we talk about the contract here, has the Corps been able to find cost savings as you've been constructing this project?
Yep, one of the things that we found out early on was we were getting a lot more capacity with our pile in the soil. Basically, when you try to pull the pile out of the ground, we had a lot more capacity than what we anticipated. So we were able to actually go back and modify the contract to take out basically deep soil mixing. Deep soil mixing was basically where the contract would solidify the ground so it wouldn't expand upward. So obviously with the soil being 30 feet underground roughly, the soil's like a big sponge. When you take weight off, it actually wants to expand upward. So one thing that we learned was, if we have a lot more capacity than we thought with the piles, we could hold it down. So we're taking the deep soil mixing out of the contract and going to save hopefully a couple $1 million.
Wow.
So
that's excellent. And as far as just the normal construction, everything's on budget and moving forward and on schedule?
Everything I've seen so far is they're actually a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of where they should be at and what they've gotten built. So they've gotten a lot done this summer and this fall. And then what they plan to have, before winter shutdown is pretty amazing in just a couple months.
Sure. So we have the inlet control site, ongoing construction, the wild rice control structure under construction. What does the Corps have planned for next summer?
So next summer, basically the wild rice river structure, starting to place the foundations for that, the walls, the control structure, starting to get that thing kind of built and out of the ground. That's kind of one of the big things at the wild rice river structure. At the inlet, it'll basically be just, kind of starting to build the stilling base and kind of those downstream pieces, the walls, the piers, the abutments, starting to build the structure up.
Sure.
And then at a certain point, maybe next summer, the following summer, you start to add the bridge components across.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the steel gates are being fabricated down in the southern parts of the U.S., Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and we'll start seeing them in a couple of years. So
Sure. And then we also have plans to start moving forward on the I-29 grade raise project, hopefully next summer.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think maybe that would also provide some level of excavation for the Red River control structure, and we're looking at that a few years down the line.
Yep.
And that would really be the larger structure of the three that we're talking about here, right?
Yep. So we always kind of jokingly say the inlet is kind of like a smaller cousin. The wild rice is the younger brother, and the red's the big brother.
Sure.
So the Red River structure is gigantic compared to the other two structures. So hopefully that'll get awarded in spring of 22.
Okay. And that's currently being designed right now, I understand. And there's a physical model as well in Vicksburg that's been providing excellent engineering results.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So our Engineering and Research Development Center in Vicksburg, Mississippi has been basically building a scale model last fall and last winter, and we've been kind of testing the water flow going through it to make sure the velocities are matching what our computer models say. So it's been pretty cool to see kind of how those two physical model and basically computer model kind of match up together. So that's been ongoing, but yeah, like I said, we're currently ongoing with the design of the river structure. We're 65% of the way done through that thing, and we've got a nationwide team from people from Los Angeles to Memphis, Tennessee, all the way out to Philadelphia. People all across the country working on this project, bringing in their expertise for the betterment of the project.
Yeah, I understand there's quite a few districts working on this at the moment, so that's very very cool to see that occurring.
Yep, it's not just a St. Paul-led project or St. Paul-only project. We've got 10 districts across the country and 5 divisions. So there's 9 divisions in the Corps of Engineers. We've got 5 of them on this project. So, and I think there's 45 districts, if I remember right, and we've got 9 or 10 of them on this project.
Excellent.
So, bringing in the best people from across the country to help us out.
Yeah, it's such a unique project. I mean, it's one of a kind, and the split delivery of this project with our partnership with the Corps is absolutely outstanding. And I think we're all learning quite a few innovative and cost-saving approach to contracting and building these terribly important pieces of infrastructure. So it's very cool to see the national collaboration that's occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty cool last summer last spring to get to go to Winnipeg and see their project. And you stand on the banks of the channel with the water flowing through it. It's almost like looking 15 years in the future and kind of seeing what the Fargo-Moorhead project will look like. So it has saved their town and community multiple times over. So
yeah, no doubt about it. Well, thanks, Dwayne. I really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.
It's been nice to see the progress, and I'll make sure I stick my head out here every once and again.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
Yes. Today I have with me Dan Jacobson, the chairman of the Cass County Joint Water Resource Board. And the Cass County Joint Water Resource Board has been the acquiring entity for all the property necessary for the diversion channel and the southern embankment. And so we have Dan here. We're going to ask him some questions about the status of the property acquisition and see how things are going. So Dan, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself and just mention how long you've been on the Cass County Joint Board and how long you've been working on the diversion project.
Okay, my name is Dan Jacobson. I'm on the Cass County Joint Water Resource Board. Been on there for 10 years, and all 10 of those years have been associated with the diversion project. And as far as land process, we take it very serious because it's a really important part of this project. It starts with a design that shows that the property is needed for the project. Next, we go that the Diversion Authority approves us to start the process of purchasing it. So we start with initial contact of the property owner, and then we sometimes we have to ask for rights of entry to survey the property to get the property lines down. Mm-hmm. And then we determine the fair market value, and that's done with registered appraisers. Mm-hmm. And then our land agents go out and offer just compensation. And if there's a home involved, it's relocation and reestablish benefits. And then we, hopefully, we have a purchase agreement and negotiations through our land agents.
So talk to me a little bit about the appraisal part of this process. So we're required to get an appraisal in order to set the value of the land. And we've been utilizing a whole host of different appraisers for that, haven't we?
Yes, I think we have at least 4 appraisal firms that we are using.
And they're very experienced at what they do. I guess, have you ever had any issues with the values that they come up with?
Well, not really. I think they've done an excellent job.
Yeah.
But that is their job, and they're professionals.
Right.
We try and look at both sides of the issues. Our land agents do all the negotiation, and we just basically look at what they bring to us and try not to get involved personally in the negotiations.
Sure. So how many parcels has the Cass County Joint Water Resource District acquired?
395 to date.
Okay. So that on top of the City of Fargo's acquisitions, you're somewhere around 750 parcels total. It's been a huge sacrifice for some folks that have been impacted by the program to date. And about how many properties do you imagine we have left to acquire for the diversion channel and the southern embankment?
I think the last number I've seen is we're in negotiation on 155.
155. So we're getting close.
Yep.
Probably about a quarter of the properties left to still acquire at this point. Yeah. And so, can you tell the legislators a little bit about what you like about the process, and where the landowners have the ability to, I guess, work with you and to try to find a resolution to maybe the value on their property if there's a difference?
Well, I think it's very, very fair. We do our appraisal. If they aren't satisfied with it, they can get their own appraisal. And if there's a difference, then is when the negotiation, of course, starts. But it gives them a chance to feel very confident that we're offering them a fair price.
Sure, sure. And so from my standpoint as the diversion executive director, I've been asked to keep this project moving forward on schedule and on budget. And one of the constraints that we have is the procurement of the public-private partnership, the developer that's going to be building the channel component of the project. And as we move into 2021, we are fully anticipating getting bids and starting construction in 2021 on the channel. So that obviously has put a lot of pressure on the Cass County Joint Board to process all of the parcels that are necessary for that channel. And it's probably led to some of the more difficult conversations lately concerning property values.
Yeah, we're under a time strain, so we're very cautious that we're offering them a fair value, and hopefully we can negotiate to where we're comfortable and they're comfortable.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And keeping in mind, of course, right, that what we're asking of people, it's a very difficult. There's farmsteads in here operating, a lot of egg operations operating in the area that's impacted. So Dan, every month in our diversion board packet, we have this property acquisition status report. Can you just kind of show us what this is and talk about it for a second?
Well, it's color-coded to these properties that are needed and what stage they're in, the green stage we've already acquired, and the blues in negotiation. So there's different colors for different phases, and we meet every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks we're hoping that this changes as we acquire more properties. But it's a good map for us to look at to see where we're at and where we have to be.
And you've mentioned before, you've been involved in this diversion project for 10 years, through the initial concept all the way to the point that we are today. And so this has been a very long process, and it is a long process to acquire property. And so the blue that you're in negotiation on that map, there's quite a few acreage that are in negotiation. And part of the issue is we have to have money available to purchase those properties if there were to be a deal struck. So at any one time, we have a large amount of appraised properties, and it's one of the reasons why we continue to have carryover dollars with the State Water Commission,
yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a long time. This process takes a long time, but we have to have the money available when we finally come to an agreement and make the purchase.
Yep. Yep. And in our carryover dollars, of course, we expend them, but then they accrue again. But we always have to have sufficient dollars available to cover the negotiations of the property. And there's obviously a lot of boxes that are still white. So what are those?
In the bottom, that's where we need flowage easement for the retention area, and those will just be easements and not outright purchases.
Sure.
For when the water has to be held there during the flood events.
And I understand those probably aren't necessary to acquire those flowage easements until the project's constructed and ready to be operated. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think as soon as we get the property purchase that we need for the construction of the project, we'll start going after the flowage easements.
Yeah. So we have a number of, I guess, milestones coming up here, and One would be the acquisition of the property for the diversion channel, so we can hand that over once we get the P3 bids early this upcoming year. And then obviously continued property acquisitions for the Corps of Engineers work as well. And they're looking at the Red River control structure and the I-29 grade raise project.
And I don't know if we've talked about wetland.
And the Drain 27 wetland project too.
Yep.
That is moving forward right now as well.
Come through, so we're just in the process of appraising that land, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think those three projects alone is it's going to be over $200 million ask from the federal government this next year, and we have a lot of good indications that we'll be able to acquire those dollars. But of course, it's always an effort for us to go to Washington and advocate on behalf of the Corps of Engineers in order to acquire those federal funds as well. But just between the diversion inlet and control and the wild rice structure, we've already expended over $200 million of federal funds to date. So that continues to move forward very well.
We're looking at about 8,000 acres for just the channel alone. So it's huge, and you can see why our land costs are so high.
Yeah, and most of that land is ag land, is that not correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so it is impactful for our ag market. And have you talked about that with producers and farmers in the area as far as what impact our acquisition program has had on land prices?
Well, nobody really wants to sell land if they're an active farmer, so they'd like to be able to trade or find other land in the area so they can continue their farming operation. And it's probably made it a little difficult that we bought all this land at one time and in one place, and it makes replacement land pretty hard to come by. So if anything, we've probably kept the land market high.
Yeah. And sometimes you guys have purchased more land than is needed for the right-of-way extents because the landowner wished to either leave agricultural activities or there were access issues to the property. So we do have some remnant, we call them remnant land parcels. And maybe you could tell us, maybe have you done land trades with some of that land, or does that provide the Cass County board, joint board, with some flexibility and negotiations?
Yeah, there is remnant land pieces, but we have yet to do much with them because we're not 100% sure that some of that property might be needed for something related to the project.
Sure.
And when we do dispose of these, it has to be in a fair way that everybody has a chance at them, I guess.
Sure.
So we haven't done really any trades yet.
And if we had some, do we regularly offer the land, if we didn't need the land, say, would we offer the land back to the original property owner?
That's usually the way the contract, they have first right of refusal.
Okay. And could they purchase it at the same price that we purchased it?
I guess
them?
we haven't gone to that, but that would sound like a fair way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I hope you have enjoyed the virtual tour. We certainly wish you could have been here in person, but I hope we've been able to kind of show a preview of where we're at in the status of our construction and our land acquisition, the status of the federal construction. We're certainly here and we're ready to answer any questions that you may have. So reach out to myself or any members of the diversion board. I thank you again, and I look forward to discussing at the Water Topics Committee meeting. So.